Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to view Powder from 1995. So this movie is available on Hulu. I didn't realize till after the fact. I just went on and watched this movie regardless. And then I found out that this movie is available on an app that hopefully everyone can see. So if you have Hulu already, go ahead and check out Powder. Really a solid, good film where we have at points where Jeremy slash Powder is to go on and have these special abilities to either freak people out or have them really go on and praise this kid for him possibly being the next stage of evolution, and quoting off Einstein quotes to possibly confirm that to that person, who is of course Powder. To me, this movie easily reminds me of the John Travolta movie Phenomenon, or the John Travolta movie Michael, or even the Michael Clark Duncan movie Green Mile. We, of course, have Powder, or Jeremy. I'm going to call him Powder for most of this review, hopefully, or Jeremy, either way. But anyways, so Powder is to have this ability of electromagnetism, and he is to have this electromagnetic charge that, of course, is to make him fear any kind of electricity, because at some points he could quite possibly die, or harmful things could happen. But with that said, also Jeremy has these magic tricks that he is to go on and be able to do throughout this movie, which are really fascinating. To go on and have you kind of touching a spoon, and then having Jeremy go on and perform this magic trick with all these silverware pieces smashing together on this table, freaking everyone out. And so there are certain people that are wanting to push Jeremy's ability to hope that Jeremy will somehow give them answers or give them closure, or be able to go on and have them be able to see how unique Jeremy really is. We have Jeremy at some points who can go on and be able to hear thoughts from people, be able to say that they are not angry with him, that they are afraid of him, as well as Jeremy being able to break glass, destroy certain things, because he just wants to go home. He just wants to leave this world of these people that hate and fear him, to go back to the comfort of his basement, to go on and read these books that of course he knows by heart, to the point where you can ask him what page, or he can ask you like, hey, just rattle me off a page number, and he'll know the book forwards and backwards. To the point of Jesse Caldwell, who is to go on and call somebody within this film and tell us that Jeremy is to have this kind of ability to read beyond his years, but also like he has the mind of a child, to just kind of like say that like this kid is brilliant, but like he isn't really familiar with our world. Like something as simple as going outside or being around a tree or something like that. He's only read about it in books, but never really experienced it. But anyways, so with that said, this is such an interesting film. But again, I always like the outcast kind of character who is to go on and have a lot of people just dislike him, but then eventually we find these like crop of people that are to go on and have this person possibly be a good friend of theirs and possibly help them through a difficult time, or eventually to just become friends just because like this person is like a one of a kind experience that they will never possibly have again. So with that said, I feel that this movie is great, but I feel that also um, it's kind of a very like heartbreaking kind of story. Also, I was just like, man, there were certain times where I was like, man, this is kind of like emotionally hitting kind of film, and so some people may not like it because of that. But man, I enjoyed this movie, Powder. So definitely go on and check it out. And it was so interesting to see Sean Patrick Flannery as this character, the guy that I've seen in like The Boys season 3 or Boondock Saints, to go on and see him as this Powder character from once I've seen him before and not even realizing it. Like I didn't even really see Sean as this character until he would just start to consistently move his head around a lot, and then there were certain times where I was like, oh, I see it, because like I couldn't like see Sean within this character because of how like clean shaven this character was, and how all he had for his face was just eyelashes, because of course we have a character that can't grow hair. To also know that Sean had to go through 2 hours of being sprayed down with white paint to go on and do this role, and to not only like shave his whole entire body down to have to go on and do this, because of course with this character having an electromagnetic charge, there is no way possible that this man could grow hair. So it's kind of fascinating to have seen this character that had to kind of go through this whole thing to do this role, and how committed he had to be to it. And it was so fascinating to just kind of hear those kind of things. And half the time the guy had to go on and be like half naked or naked to get the spray down of this white paint to go on and perform this role. But anyways, let's go on into that double five time territory. Let's go into hopefully more specifics about this film, because it's about that time to just go into spoiler time. Spoiler time, it's about that time to get into spoil this movie. So yeah. So in the very beginning of this film, we have a ambulance that kind of looks like the Ecto 1 car, because of course, like in the old-fashioned ambulances, a lot of the times they would look similar to the Ecto 1 as far as look, because that's just how like you would also see that in sometimes old hearses where they would kind of look like that also. Weirdly, I don't know why. But so we go on to, of course, have this ambulance that is quickly trying to get this pregnant woman to this hospital to deliver this child. And so, supposedly, what ended up happening, as Powder is to mention in his own words, is I guess at some point his mother was to have been struck by lightning while she was pregnant with him, and that was to cause this woman desperately needing to go on and deliver this child at this hospital. So we have Jeremy's or Powder's father that is to go on and talk to the doctor after this whole event. And the doctor is to go on and tell this man that Jeremy's mother could not survive the pregnancy because of the whole trauma of everything about her getting hit by lightning, and that Jeremy's father's baby is to have been has to have become albino, and is to have light sensitivity upon his eyes, and that eventually this kid will go on and need sunglasses and everything like that because his eyes will, of course, be very sensitive. Eventually, at some point, they'll go on and have Jeremy wear uh, eye contacts to eventually uh, have his eyes be less sensitive, and so on and so forth through this movie. I think it's just to avoid having him having like so many like uh, contacts that he has to go throughout the whole movie with. But anyways, so we go on and we have Jeremy's father who is to approach his newborn son, to then all of a sudden have the doctor scrambling because they are seeing a certain kind of brain pattern, or they're seeing certain kind of machines that are freaking out and they don't understand it. We also have Jeremy's father that is to look upon his son and tell his son that this is not his son, that this is not his baby, rejecting his son to the point of Jeremy now having to go on and live what is to be his life with his grandparents because of immediately Jeremy being rejected by his father. So, cue us going on to having Sheriff Doug Barnon making his way to Jeremy's grandparents' home, where we find out that Jeremy's grandfather had passed away through natural causes. And so Sheriff Doug is coming into the house realizing that Powder is down in the basement, and Sheriff Doug has heard some wild stories about Jeremy, and there's a possibility that this kid may be special in some way. So instead of Sheriff Doug personally going down there, he instead is to call upon Jesse Caldwell, who of course is to be a person who works within this school. And the sheriff calls upon Jesse to retrieve this kid because there's a possibility that he is kind of unaware about how this kid could react to this situation. So, and the funny thing is, we have Sheriff Doug who is talking to Deputy Harley, and we have the moment when Deputy Harley is to look at Jeremy and is to immediately say like, "Hey, that's not normal." And Sheriff Doug is like, "Well, hey, like I guess we finally met a guy that is more whiter than you." I thought that that interaction was so funny. So, but we have Jesse that goes on and meets with Jeremy, and the first thing that she ends up doing is wanting to like take her hand out to eventually have an olive branch to this kid to just be like, "Hey, I'm going to be your friend. Like, I want to help you." And Jeremy comes out of the shadows and is to put his hand out, and Jesse's then realize how white this kid's skin is. And we then go on and have Jesse interacting with Jeremy, and come to find out Jeremy is to have a large amount of books upon this one room, and so Jesse is to grab one of them and say, "Wow, like, is this seriously a book that you've read? Because I know that there's a lot of kids who can't go on to read this kind of book." And Jeremy is to tell Jesse, it's like, "Well, hey, just pick a page." And she goes on to like say a page number, and Jeremy is to immediately rattle off that whole quote upon the first beginning of the book, and Jesse's like, "Oh my god, like this kid knows like a whole room of books by heart. This is impossible." So Jesse is seeing how Jeremy is to be this wonder kid, and so Jesse brings Jeremy to this school to then go on and start making calls, telling that this kid is to uh, be this intelligent kid that is beyond his years, but is to also have the mind of a child. That it seems that he is to go on and not be aware of or has really experienced life within his years also. So Jeremy goes on to make his way to this cafeteria where he is to be met by the bully of this story, which is to be a guy named John. So Powder makes his way to this cafeteria just eating his lunch, and all of a sudden John and a number of these guys are to arrive by this table, and they are to tell Jeremy, since this is his first day here, that he's going to have to go on and wear a spoon, either upon his nose, and one of the kids are to showcase this. I think it's Mitch. Yeah, it's Mitch. Showcasing the whole putting a spoon over your nose, or that John is to tell Powder that he's going to have to either wear it on his nose or up his butt. So Powder then goes on and is to say, it's like, well, hey, do you want to see something? And all of a sudden he starts rubbing the spoon consistently, and then all of a sudden all of these other spoons start smacking together upon this one table, freaking everyone out, all of a sudden getting certain people that are getting spattered with food. And so we even have at one point where one thing of silverware is all of a sudden dancing, making its way to all of these others, and everyone is just baffled and godsmacked by this, to the point of them going on and just be like, wow, okay, like, whatever is up with this kid. Like, for sometimes this kind of reminds me of like a Poltergeist movie in some ways, but like this guy doesn't have this ghostly power. It's just electromagnetism and so on and so forth. So we go on into this story, and so I'm trying to see if there's anything that I've forgotten about already. We push on and have Sheriff Doug, who is to make his way home after a long day. And so Sheriff is to go on and talk to the person who is taking care of his wife, who I believe is Maxine. And so the sheriff is to go on and talk about how it seems that Sheriff Doug's wife is really fighting for her life, trying to just hang on. Sheriff Doug, before he is to go in and see his wife, is to see his son, and they have this kind of brief, just kind of like, hey pa, hey son, and they walk off, but it feels like there is some distance between the two of them. So we have the sheriff going on to see his wife, kissing her, and just kind of baffled or confused why she is to hold on the way she is, because of how painful the things that she is going through are. So then go on to have Powder, who is to go into Donald Ripley's class. And Donald Ripley is to go on and be consistently talking about energy and how, like, it's basically the key to everything, and how eventually we have Ripley, who is going to present a Jacob's ladder like conductor of electricity. And while that all of a sudden is happening, we start to have Jeremy that is starting to freak out. It seems that Jeremy is to have this metal piece by his hand, and it is kind of spinning round and round. Lindsay, who of course is one of the students, is noticing this, as well as we also had Ripley that was to tell Jeremy to just kind of tilt his head to the side to go on and look at Lindsay. And like that's the first interaction we have between both Powder and Lindsay, but that'll just continue to grow throughout this film as Lindsay is to see Powder as this fascinating guy. So Ripley is to, of course, have this Jacob's Ladder experiment going on. And all of a sudden, we then have Powder, who is to be hit by this electricity and is to have his shirt kind of ripped open. And so Jeremy is to go on to the hospital, and we of course have Ripley that is to completely understand what is going on with Powder, saying that this guy is to there's a whole reason why he doesn't have hair, because he basically is electricity or elasticity, I think he ends up saying. I'm not quite sure, but Jeremy is to somehow rationalize this kid and is to let everyone know that this kid is to possibly be the next stage of evolution, and so on and so forth. As Jeremy had to go on and take this stool and bash this Jacob's Ladder thing to go on and destroy it so he could save this kid from certain death, possibly, within this classroom, and then going into this hospital to go on and talk about this kid and how unique he is. But it seems that Jeremy is to sneak away from this hospital without anybody knowing. Jeremy is to go on and take his clothes and start walking back to his house, where all of a sudden he again makes his way back to speaking with Lindsay, and Powder is to go on and tell Lindsay that he can hear people's thoughts and can kind of like open them up and see like how they really feel on the inside. And Lindsay is not freaked out by this. She's just kind of curious about what he really means. But we have Jeremy consistently walking on right at this bridge. We have both the deputy and sheriff that is to stop him and are to tell him, like, hey, like, you can't go back home. Like, you have to go with us. Like, you have to go back. And if he will not go on and do that, that he may get arrested. And that, of course, is when Jeremy is to tell the deputy that he is afraid of him, and that is the reason why that they are to be like cautious with this guy, because they consider him a danger at some point. So we have Jeremy go on, and I guess he is to have taken this IQ test, or take these like class advancement kind of tests and so on and so forth, to eventually see where they can put him. And so we go on and we have Jesse, who is bringing Jeremy in to talk to guys like Dr. Alan Stryper and a number of other men that I think are to be possibly in this education board or people of a certain kind of field. So Jeremy is to come into this environment to talk to mainly Stryper here. And so this guy is to go on and say that Jeremy has a IQ or an intellect that is like beyond. So much so that they don't even have a name for how smart this guy is and how he is to possibly be a genius because they don't have any other name to slap a title upon for how smart Jeremy is. So immediately while Jeremy is talking to these guys, he is not thinking that they're going to go on and give him all these answers that he's always ever wanted. No. Jeremy is to go on and immediately look at these men and say, like, oh, well, like, because of how smart I am, you all think that I cheated somehow. You want to understand or you want to know how I tricked you all. And it's not like that. Like, it's not like there was no trick, but if anything, these guys are just naturally going to assume that anyways, and eventually just discipline this Powder because he would have had to have cheated. He would have had to have tricked. He would have had to have gone on and not been able to really go on and really been as smart as he is to, of course, be. So Jeremy, of course, goes on to leave the room after just being insulted by these men, and we can see this effect where all the lockers are to be all the like the locker combinational locks upon these lockers are all kind of like rocking back and forth in a kind of rhythm kind of way, and I thought that that was really fun. So realizing that Jeremy is to tell these guys that he is something beyond their comprehension and that he is going to leave because of it because he's just wasting his time here. So we of course go on and have Jeremy, who's going on this bus trip with the rest of this class to just go out camping. So we have Sheriff Doug and we have Deputy Harley or Harland that is going out with these kids and going out camping. So or just kind of going outdoors. Deputy Harlan, my bad, or Harley. So we have, of course, Powder that is going on and just kind of looking at the forest and touching these lizards and just kind of having fun with them. But then all of a sudden we, of course, have John, who again is to be afraid of Powder and is to take this rifle to Powder and is to tell him that he could just easily end him right now. He could end Powder right now. And because of the pure fact that this guy is to still be this dangerous, like undefined person and so on and so forth that they need to put down, as if this is bizarrely some old Yeller kind of thing, or old Yeller kind of situation. Mitch, of course, is to try to prevent John from firing the gun, and instead of there being a shot coming from John's rifle, instead there is a shot coming from Deputy Harley's rifle, as he is to go and shoot down a deer, possibly not in the season to take down deer, um, as if there is possibly a season, as if I'm confirming that or whatever. But for some reason, whatever Harley was to do here was to possibly be illegal, because Deputy Harley was to look at Powder and to tell him, like, hey, like, don't tell anybody that you saw this. So we go on and we have Jeremy rushing to this deer that is about to die. And so while Harley is to be fearful for Jeremy consistently touching this deer, Harley gets closer and closer to him to just be like, okay, that's good. That's You've touched this deer for long enough. And so Harley goes on and is to try to grab onto Powder, and Powder grabs onto Harley. And so all of a sudden now Harley is now in pure agony. He's freaking out, and he's screaming and howling in pain as Powder is still latching on, as they're trying to break the lock between both the deer and both Harley from Powder. And so John, even at one point, is to hold this rifle to Powder, telling him to let go of Harley. And we have, of course, Jeremy that is telling these guys that he needed to go on and have Harley see. He needed to see what he did to this deer. And so what really happened to this transformation, this transference of things, is transference sounds better. This transfer of things. Let's go with that word. So come to find out, we had Harley via Powder that was to see how death felt. Because, of course, Jeremy was to go on and had the ability to feel his mother die on the day that Jeremy gave birth, or that Jeremy's mother gave birth to Jeremy. Jeremy experienced that death and was to go on and want to show Harley how killing something felt. So Jeremy goes on to go back to the school, where now he's talking to Sheriff Doug and wants Powder to explain what had all happened there. And Jeremy just goes on and says that I wanted to have him see, like, what he was doing. And Sheriff Doug is just like, okay, whatever that means. So you have to, like, so he's like, I don't know what you meant by that, so you have to explain to me what you did. So Sheriff Doug leaves, Jesse comes within the office, and so Jeremy at this point is desperate to want to go home. Jeremy is to consistently tell Jesse that he wants to go home, because he doesn't like it here. He is to go on and start breaking clocks, breaking glass doors, frames of certain pictures, consistently convincing Jesse that he wants to go home, and saying the fact that, do you really think that you can hold me here with all the abilities that Jeremy actually has? So we, of course, go on again and have Sheriff Doug that is making his way back home, having this doctor go on and mention that that his wife is still just hanging on, for some reason that he can't really explain. And so the sheriff is to go on and see his wife and just be like, you know what, there's something that I need to do here. There's something I need to go on and figure out how to help out my wife somehow. And hoping that maybe through talking with Jeremy, that maybe I need this kid to be able to finally talk to my wife, because it seems that this kid has this experience that I'm not aware of. And to the point of Sheriff Doug going on, and when he talks to the deputy, and the deputy finally confesses that whatever was to be in that deer was put into Harley, and Harley could feel this deer's death, and Harley never wanted to go on and ever hold up another rifle or another gun again against anyone, because he just could no longer do it. To the point of the sheriff coming in deputy's home to realize that the deputy is doing some massive spring cleaning of all these guns that are in his home, because the deputy can no longer go on and hold a gun to anybody. Which I kind of thought was like really fascinating to just kind of see that kind of real change in a person. So we go on and we have Ripley, who is to meet up with Jeremy and wants to ask him if he's ever read any Einstein books, and that Ripley is to mention how after meeting Powder, how much better his life has become, how eventually he's much happier, he's had better lovemaking sessions than he's ever had in 10 years, and so on and so forth, because being with this kid. And Ripley used to tell Jeremy, it's like, and you know all of this is true because you can, of course, be able to do any number of things to know that. And so Ripley wants to go on and wants to like tell Jeremy, it's like, well, hey, like, I want to be your friend. And Jeremy is kind of being very standoffish with Ripley. How Ripley's going on and telling Jeremy that he is this like wonder kid, and Powder is going on and saying, so what? And Ripley's like, dude, I'm telling you that you're like this wonder kid, and you're just saying, so what? Like, I thought you were a genius. Like, I thought you were smart. Like, and so when Ripley is to ask to want to be Powder's friend, we of course have Powder that is still kind of very standoffish, and so Ripley is to go on and ask Powder about even being touched, and Jeremy was to go on and mention that he has never been touched by anybody, because everybody just feared him. And we of course have Ripley that's saying, well, that's wrong. Like, and so he starts to touch him upon his head, and is to just kind of give him some comfort that he has probably never had before. And so this is just like a very wonderful, like, just beautiful moment in this film. And so we then push on, and after Sheriff Doug was to go on and talk to his deputy, Sheriff Doug just really at this point is to realize that Jeremy could be the key to helping him. And so Sheriff Doug is to talk to Jesse and tell, like, hey, I need Jeremy to be able to talk to my wife, because like this kid has some ability that is beyond us, so like let's go on and let's bring this kid in. So we have Sheriff Doug that brings Jeremy into this home, and Maxine is to, of course, be very afraid of this moment, just because, like, hey, you don't know what this kid can do to her. Like, this kid is unusual, blah, blah, blah. So Maxine is going on and calling Sheriff Doug's son to rush his way here to hopefully prevent some kind of horrific event that could kill Sheriff Doug's wife. And so Jeremy is to go on and start talking kind of through Sheriff Doug's wife as kind of this link between Sheriff Doug and Sheriff Doug's wife. So Jeremy is to go on and talk to Sheriff Doug about this moment in the snow that Doug's wife had lost her wedding ring, and how both Doug and his son were going on for hours and hours going through this snow, desperately hoping that they can find this wedding ring. And she loved the fact that these two people loved her so much to desperately want to go on and find this wedding ring, and how it brought them close together, both Doug and his son, for looking for this. And come to find out, the whole entire time, Doug's wife had hidden this wedding ring in this metal case. And after the sheriff was to go on and open this case and just like, oh my god, like, she kept it this whole entire time, and it was in this case. And the sheriff starts crying, and all that Doug's wife ever wanted to do was to go on and bring both the sheriff and his son together. And the last thing that she wanted to do before she was to pass was to somehow figure out a way to continue to bring the sheriff and his son together. And so, realizing that was her last wish, Sheriff Doug was to go on, and when he was to first see his son arrive upon this house, Sheriff Doug goes on and is to confirm that finally his wife had passed and had gone on to embrace his son and hug him, and hope that connection will be firm from the loss of both mother and wife. So we then go on and have Jeremy, who is again to meet up with Lindsay, where there is this kind of town get-together. I'm not quite sure exactly what this is, but we go on and we have Jeremy that is to meet up with Lindsay, and Jeremy is to talk about how every single thing has a connection beyond what Ridley is to say in the beginning of this film about how, like, energy connects everything. That Jeremy is to kind of like say here that all of us are kind of atoms and energy, and all these things are like connected into one. And so Lindsay's like, well, what do you mean by that? Like, so, like, I am also this tree. I am also an inmate on death row. Like, I'm a part of all these things, all these random strangers that I've never met before. I'm all connected to all of them. And Jeremy's like, yeah, in a way, yeah. And so we have, of course, where Jeremy is being so close to Lindsay, and at some point, Jeremy used to say that some people would think that he's ugly, but really also that he's just different than everyone else. And Lindsay used to go on and tell Powder that that he is the most beautiful thing that she's ever seen. And so we have Lindsay's father, who I believe is to be a guy named Deke. Uh, Deke Kellaway. And so Deke is to try to go on and separate Lindsay from Powder. And so Deke is to go on and say to Jesse that if this Powder guy gets anywhere close to his daughter, that Jesse will get a massive lawsuit. And that, of course, is to desperately separate these kids again. So, from which that it seemed that they had this really good connection. So, Potter then goes on to make his way to school and is to see a number of kids that are in this gymnasium playing basketball, and all of a sudden we have Powder, who is looking inside this locker room of sorts, to see this guy who is taking this tank top off and is pouring this tank top into this fountain, getting this tank top really wet, and then pouring this tank top full of water all over himself. I'm like, what a weird visual within this film. Kind of reminds me of the Australia movie with Hugh Jackman and Nicole Kidman, where Hugh Jackman is dumping this whole barrel of water all over himself. But I guess that is to give the ooh-ah moment to all the ladies, when eventually we also have Powder, who is half naked through a good portion of this film at some points. Especially when we go on and we have when Powder is to meet up with this doctor, and the doctor is to mention that this kid is to have really good health. It's just that he's just different looking than other people, and he's to tell Jesse that it's like, no, this kid's healthy, he's fine. So we have then Powder turning to John and these kids that are all playing basketball, and so John is to go on and call this kid a perv or like a peeping Tom just because he's looking at this kid going and pouring water over himself. And so eventually John is to go on and take Jeremy's hat and is to put it upon his head and is to tell him that, hey, if you really want to, like, if you think you're man enough, like, come and get this hat from me, kind of thing. It's kind of like this keep away kind of moment. And so Powder is to go on and tell John that John has become just like his father, which I guess for John is to be possibly the worst thing that Powder could ever say to him. That Powder is to make John realize that he is repeating everything that his father had said at some moment in the past, where I guess John was to have gone on and possibly been abused or beaten by his father because he needed to be man enough. And so Powder is kind of throwing back that memory to John, and John is to get even more upset with Jeremy for having known that somehow. So they go on and they force Jeremy outside, realizing that this kid is afraid of lightning, as he is to shiver as there is to seem to be a thunderstorm outside. So they rush this kid outside to declothe him and force him into this muddied water. And so we then go on, and throughout also Jeremy's house, we start to see a number of lightning rods that are to have been on top of his house also, showcasing that there is possibly a reasoning for that. Um, but so we go on, and we have Jeremy who is de-pantsed and everything. And so we go on and have a moment where eventually uh, Jeremy is freaking out here to the point of all of a sudden all these metal items are to be trying to cling to him, even to the point where Mitch's earring is starting to pull away from him, and John's jean button is trying to pull away. All of a sudden, because the impact of this kind of slingshot like thing, a lot of the kids are to get rocked back, and all of a sudden we start to see that John is seemingly not breathing. We start to have Powder that is to somehow, with his hands, start to defibrillate John to bring him back to life, and then eventually John is to be somehow resurrected by Jeremy through his defibrillating power from him being a conductor or electrical outlet of sort. So we then go on and have Jeremy that is to make his way back to his now abandoned home, where it seems that Jeremy is to go on and use his power to unlock this door to just go back into his house, because of course he was comfortable in this basement, and so he makes his way back there. So we have Jesse, who is to go and meet Jeremy after this whole event happened, and is to make her way back to where Jeremy had met her originally. And so Jesse is to be mortified by the fact that they had taken every bit of furniture away from this home, and Jesse is confirming with Powder that they will go on and find every single book and every single stitch of furniture, because technically this is Jeremy's. And so Jesse is to talk to Jeremy, and we of course reconfirm the fact that Jesse was to say to Jeremy that that he was the most like amazing thing that she'd ever seen in her life, and how much that this kid would impact her life, and so on and so forth. So we go on and we have Ripley, who is to mention to Jesse and Jeremy that the because of the weather, like they should probably go on and try to get out of this house. And so as they're leaving, we have both the sheriff and we have both the deputy that want to go on and possibly arrest Jeremy if he doesn't again go and do what they want. Plus, this home had eventually been taken away by the bank, which we find out in the early part of this story that I guess the bank had just taken this house and just sold everything, and so Jeremy could not be able to even own this home if he wanted to. But I'm sure eventually, maybe at some point, we could have either Jesse or Ripley who were like, "Dude, I'm gonna buy that house." Like, just have Jeremy just kind of live the life of what he wants. So, as the deputy is to want to just throw the cuffs on Jeremy, and the sheriff is like, hold on, just kind of like, no, like let's kind of bring this kid easy, like he's not dangerous. So But we go on and we just have Jeremy, the more and more that he's talking to these people and realizing that he's never gonna go on and do what he wants, Jeremy just finally decides to give up and give in, and eventually is to also talk to Sheriff Doug and say to him that after his wife was to die, that it's possible that Jeremy even felt even much more beyond what death felt like, but maybe even possibly what heaven felt like also. So Jeremy rushes out into this field, consistently running, holding out his hands, to eventually be so electrified by electricity that he evaporates and is to possibly go on and die, to vanish, to disappear. And so we have all of our characters by the end of this movie who are to possibly be so grateful that they were to have experienced this unique kid, but then also mourning for this kid's loss of how he had really impacted their lives. He had really changed their lives forever. And how eventually they were to take in this moment and really like understand why Jeremy had done this, why Jeremy had gone on to eventually do what he had done. We also had like Deputy Harley that is desperately calling for like backup and everything like that to try and stop this kid from running off. And we of course had the sheriff who was to grab Harley's walkie-talkie and chuck it, which I thought was kind of funny. We also had interesting moments where within this film, like certain radio frequencies could not work with Jeremy being around. We of course had Sheriff Doug, who tried to use his walkie once, and he was like, "Whoa, like this is really like freaking out." But not only we had that whole meeting where I think Stripely was to go on and ask Jeremy if he's ever gone on and seen TV, and Ripley was to go and turn on this TV to confirm to these people that there was no possible way that Powder could go on and do that, because when the TV is to be turned on, all of a sudden if the TV freaks out and is to have all this crazy amount of static, and the TV is to almost seem to explode. So Ripley's in desperation try to turn the TV off, and Jeremy is to tell people, yeah, I could never watch TV. But it was also interesting, that moment where Stripely was to go on and to mention to Powder like how like overwhelmingly like smart and intelligent this guy was, and was to of course ask Jeremy if he is to go on and understand what he is trying to tell him. And Powder goes on and is to say, it's like, well, like, you know what, if like I am as smart as you say that I am, like why are you asking me if I can comprehend what you're telling me? If I am as smart as you say. I thought that was kind of fun. But yeah, but other than that, I think everything else, there might be a thing that might kick in at some point after this review is over, but I think I'm going to kick in to just get out of here so I can go on and finish this up and get this out of there. So thank you for watching this. If there's anything that I did forget about this movie, let me know in the comments below. I'm sure there's certain quotes or there's certain specifics there might be some science fiction people out there that want to kind of break down this movie in a much more scientific like manner and so on and so forth, because a lot of people want to break down the science of this character and so on and so forth, because there's those people out there. So probably from a scientific perspective, I didn't like break down this character a lot more or whichever, but when really looking at it, I'm like, oh well, like I just wanted to break down the movie and talk about it. So nothing is perfect within a review. So with that said, I'm gonna get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody.